Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is a show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today, I think for your second programme, Noah, is Noah Laguda of Noahsure Real Estate Limited, specialists in property sales, development, funding and sourcing around the world.
Indeed.
Good, welcome to you.
Thank you.
We obviously didn't put you off from last time.
No, you didn't. No.
Good. Okay, nice to see you again.
Great to be back.
And once again, we have John Howard with us, property developer, mentor, lecturer, TV panelist, interested in estate agents, whatever else, John?
That'll do, won't it?
That'll do.
That makes me feel tired saying
Is that
it,
it? I was
actually.
just going to say, you're looking a bit weary with that. Anyway, good to have you both here. Thank you both very much for coming in. And we'll start off with Noah, your first question. I'm about to commence a small development of 15 apartments and I'm looking for approximately 60% funding. I had only previously considered conventional bank funding, but a friend suggested I might look at crowdfunding. Can the experts advise on the pros and cons of either and perhaps comment on the likely cost differences? Is that something you can help with, Noah?
Yes, it is indeed. I mean, what we do find in today's age is there is a lot more of peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding happening, and than the traditional lending that we're used to knowing about. And sort of a new generation, new age, and where everything's sort of become more accessible with social media and all these different platforms. There are so many, peer-to-peer lending platforms out there now. Crowdfunding, all that stuff, Crowdcube, and what you would find, for someone in that particular situation, it might be a good idea to look into it, either on maybe a joint venture basis, or there's more options now, I believe, more than ever. And I'm sure, John, you could probably help with that as well. And
do you think individual investors are braver today and are more willing to go into the market and be sort of entrepreneurial with their lending?
Well, I believe so. I believe there is a lot more, entrepreneurial sort of mindsets out there now. You're finding younger people now doing more of these property developments and things of that nature. And the traditional way of just getting funding isn't the only way anymore, So I definitely would say it's worth a look at.
I can remember having a company some years ago and we were looking at going on there. I think it was called the AIM market at the time. I don't know whether it's changed. And my accountant said to me, he said, you'll be able to do it. He said, and then you'll spend the next 30 years trying to get rid of all those investors that are questioning you every time you want to sharpen your pencil.
Yeah.
And I think with crowdfunding, the thought of having hundreds of little shareholders questioning what you're doing every day might be a bit off-putting. I don't know. But have you been involved with crowdfunding, John?
I've looked into it. I mean, you're talking to a dinosaur now, really. That's the problem. Me and Stephen are sort of at the age of, we used to borrow money from clearing banks, like the big 5 banks, and those days are now gone. We just haven't got a relationship with them anymore.
That relationship has changed because at one time, you were loyal to a bank, they were loyal to you,
Absolutely.
You had a reoccurring relation. It just doesn't happen today, does it?
I think it all changed in 2008. No, I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it all changed then, and I think the big 5, if you like, we don't need to name them and publicise them, but the big 5 are not interested in property really, from what I can see at all. And that's allowed all these, like you said, different aspirational banks and bridges and other lending institutions like Crowd Property type people to come on board. And they've done a great job really. They're not that cheap, but they're quick. I've got a bank I won't say who it is, but borrow money from. I borrow 50% loan to value. It takes them 3 months to lend me any money. Now, the managing director does ring me or email me on a Sunday, which is very nice. But, I just wish he'd got on with it the rest of the week, really. So that's the old-fashioned way, wasn't it? And so I still do that a little bit, but absolutely, I'm looking into all sorts of different funding opportunities, like everyone else. You know, you show me a developer that doesn't need funding. You know, we all need funding one way or the other. Indeed, okay, we may borrow less than some other people because we've got more to put in, and get low interest rates because of that, don't we? But I mean, that just depends. But everyone's got to start somewhere. And
Indeed.
Like you said, Noah, you know, these crowd platforms, they're flexible, they're quick.
They are. And for me, the reason why I would sort of encourage that sort of lending is because many people are sitting, you know, on a lot of money just in the bank that's doing nothing. So if they can put that money to work, you know, utilizing the opportunity with a crowdfunding or something of that nature.
That's a very, very good point, Noah, because I think what's happened is people in this country have got much, much richer. So the average person, when they die, bless their heart, if they've got some sort of home, it's probably, you know, worth 200,000, 300,000 or 400,000. So people are inheriting this money, and they don't know what to do with it. And that's, and some of them are putting it into these funding platforms and so on. Why wouldn't they? As long as you spread it round,
of course, yes, indeed.
Don't you think? No,
I agree. Spread it round. Yeah.
So I think if I've got you right, Noah, I think your advice is really to open your eyes and shop around.
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think just one thing I will add. I think on these crowdfunding platforms, whilst you know, the thought of thousands of shareholders would terrify me, the platforms are run in the main by very highly professional people.
Yes, very clever people.
Very clever people.
Yeah, and the technology
it's amazing.
Is well, if Noah thinks it's amazing, it must be. I mean, we think it's unbelievable, but then we're a bit behind the times, Steve, but Noah isn't.
No,
so
it is
if
really
he thinks it's really good, it must be.
Very.
I'm behind the times and left behind. long while ago. Okay, all right, John. So we'll move on to your question, which is, this isn't me, by the way. I'm 20 years old and I'm hoping to start a career in estate agency.
Good for them.
I've always had an interest in property. My dilemma is to whether to take one of the self-employed opportunities, of which there seems to be many, with an online-only agent, or whether to apply for a position with a more conventional estate agency, as you would find perhaps in the high street. Any advice would be most welcome. Well, that's good to hear somebody going into the industry.
Yes, and this is where Noah and I might differ. We might differ, which will be interesting. So I would always go the traditional route, and the reason for that is the training given by some of what we call the corporate agents, which is the big, you know, I'm sure people can work out who they are. Their training system is very, very good. And they'll get you won't get paid a great deal to start with, but you'll be very well trained. It's a he, I think, isn't it? He'll be very, very well trained. And to start with, the training is more important than the money, to be quite blunt about it. And it's amazing. Most of the people that come and join us in our agencies, guess where they've come from? They've come from a corporate background, they're well trained, they're disciplined, and they know what they're doing.
Okay. No.
Funny enough, I'd actually agree with you.
Oh, I thought you were going to say self-employed.
No, I'd actually agree with you. I mean, I have a background of managing many self-employed, you know, consultants, and it can be quite difficult without any structured discipline. And as you rightly said, training and professional development. So I definitely believe in the employed, you know, traditional route.
To start with.
You know, build the knowledge up. You know.
Well, let me come back to that. Noah. The difference here, just to explain to our viewers, is most of the online agents will use self-employed young people working from home, often going around as property consultants without supervision, without training, whereas your conventional estate agent will have you working in an office and watch very carefully
and
what
will
you do.
work you very, very hard that way. But that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing.
It's not at all.
But no, what I'm interested in, you have, as you just said, got experience in this. How do you sort of quality control what goes on when you have got a lot of self-employed people who are just working on their own?
Yeah, I think it can be very difficult, to be fair, because of this notion of they do their own thing. You know, and it can also damage the brand, you know, long term. if mistakes are made because of no supervision. I mean, if you are going to go down the route of self-employed, I'll definitely say look for a company that still provides a structure, to aid your professional development and training and support. It's all about the knowledge and the information, and that's what the traditional route tends to bring to the marketplace.
When you employ somebody who's probably, as you said, self-employed and doing their own thing, do you get a backlash when you try and influence what they do? Do they turn around and say, well, I'm self-employed,
you can't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
You do get some of that. You do.
You get that at home, though, don't you, as well, to be fair? So that's nothing new, probably. What I would say is that if someone is super talented, and you've got some great people working with you, I know, and they can earn a lot of money self-employed, can't
Indeed,
they?
they can.
A lot more than they could working, say, in one of the corporates. But I think the corporate route is the way to go first, probably, and then go self-employed potentially later on. That's how I would.
Well, I think you're right, because that way you have the basic knowledge. You know what the industry demands of you, and then you can go self-employed, apply your own ideas and twists to that.
I mean, and the great thing about being self-employed is you're not committing yourself to opening your own estate agencies. Which we've done, you've done, I've done, which is seriously expensive, and for the first year you make no money. So. It's a halfway house, really. And what you're offering to some of the people that work for you is almost a halfway house, I suppose.
Yes, indeed,
isn't it, really?
It is,
It's quite interesting.
Okay. And just very briefly, just to finish this subject off, are we confident about the future of these online agencies?
Well, I'm not so sure, to be honest, because as John rightly said before, when they first came to the marketplace, there was this sort of notion that the traditional estate agencies will somehow start dying out, but it's not happened.
No,
it's not happened.
And some of the big ones have failed around the world, haven't they? And closed down.
And they've had some serious investment put into them. I mean, if those investors had put the money into some of the traditional agencies, how big would they be?
I think that's the point, John, isn't it? There was a huge amount of investment went in, but that investment went into TV advertising for the notion and the idea, as opposed to the structure of making it work.
Making it work, and actually, I think they're flawed from the start, because as soon as you want, like we said, I think before sometime, as soon as you want money up front for doing nothing, there's no incentive to do anything
at all.
Well, on that note of money up front for doing nothing,
don't be rude.
Right, I'm going to say that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and with me are Noah Laguda and John Howard. Welcome back, guys. Let's find your questions for the second half. And if we start off with you, John, I think it's this. It's a fairly common view that if a property is put up for auction, that there's something wrong with it. Do the panel think that this is a valid point? As somebody who is hoping to start building a property portfolio specifically for buy-to-let, would the panel suggest that I look at auctions to purchase my properties, or take the lesser risk and rely on local agents' offerings, which may end up being rather more expensive and thereby reducing the potential yield? Now, I know you've had an interest in auction, haven't you, John? So you're probably well qualified to answer
Yes, hopefully relatively qualified. We owned an auction business, and also, which I've sold now, biggest in the UK, and also been selling auction for 35 years. So the first thing is there's 3,500 properties in an auction every month. If you can't find a deal online, because you can do it online now, with 3,500 properties, then really I can't help you very much. And that's what I say to people and say, I can't find a deal. The trick is this. Every property that is in the auction potentially has got a problem. If it's a problem you can solve, that's great. If it's a problem you cannot solve, it might be a land registry, it might be the neighbour, don't touch it. So it's the trade market. I would say the estate agents are more retail, and the auction's the trade market. And if you believe you're a property developer or investor, why wouldn't you be looking in the trade rather than in the retail market? So for me, absolutely, you have to be organised, you have to have the money, and that puts a lot of people off because they say, well, you know, I bid on it, I've only got 28 days to complete, how do I fund it? So Noah can probably point at people in the right direction for that one. But the problem, that is the difficulty. So, you know, if there's 100 people looking at a house on the retail market, there may be 10 people looking in an auction, pro rata.
But John, would this person is obviously looking to start their portfolio. I was always taught, you know, again, hundreds of years ago when we first started, that you develop a relationship with your local agent, and that local agent will then, after time, respect you as a buyer and start to perhaps offer you things perhaps before they fully come to the market, or make you aware of opportunities. I don't know whether that's changed tremendously.
Sadly, I think for most people, I don't know what you think, Noah, but I think for most people that has changed, because there's a lot more people chasing those types of properties. That's the first thing. And I mean, I get people come to me and say, have you got a deal? Have you got anything I could buy off you? And I'm sure Noah has the same. And you do create a relationship with those people. If they perform, definitely. And, you know, there's a number of people that I work with like that. But I think you can do the same thing with an auctioneer. In fact, more so, because the auctioneer, you know, feeds off, you know, they probably do 6 auctions a year. They need the stock. And it may be that, you know, they sell one to you, you give it back to them, or give another one to them, you know, to put in the auction and things like that. So if you can get that relationship with them, that's the way. And they look at so many properties that are unmodernised, got this problem, got that problem. But you need to know what the problem is. That's
John,
the key.
Just coming back to that point of the problem, as you mentioned, most properties will have some problem, whatever level it may be. So when you're buying at auction, you get the auctioneer's pack that's pre-prepared.
Legal pack,
That's a legal pack. Would you expect that problem to be identified in that pack?
No.
And right, because my next question is, if it isn't, do you have any recourse if you find something seriously wrong later on?
Now that's very interesting, because the law has changed quite recently, and if the auctioneer or an estate agent knows something that is detrimental to that property but does not inform you in the brochure, in the catalogue or whatever, then you have recourse. So you wouldn't have to complete and you get your deposit back.
Right. Yeah. Now, you know, I've had many years sitting in court and listening to a lot of these things, and I'm just interested in your terminology there. So you say, if the auctioneer knowingly omitted to put something in, would that extend to that he should reasonably know? In other words, that he undertakes some form of due diligence.
Stephen, Noah might have a legal background. I'm not sure, but I certainly haven't. So I think you know, with all due respect to you, you know more about this than I do probably. All I would say is, like anything, consultants, if you're never sure about anything, ask the professionals.
Get your team around you.
And ask a lawyer. But what I would say, if an auctioneer has put a property in the auction, sold it, the person hasn't completed because there is a problem, so it's gone back in the auction the following month, and they definitely know the problem, and they don't disclose that problem, then I don't think there's any argument.
There's a real issue. Yeah. Okay, anything to add to that, Noah?
I agree with the expert.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure I'm an expert, certainly not with the law, where it's concerned.
Well, John is very rarely wrong, I can tell you.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough, thank you, kindly.
I could tell you that one. Okay, Noah, your second question. With a recession in sight and economic stats being so fluid in relation to the future, do the panel still think it's wise to invest in real estate projects off-plan? It would seem to me to be a much greater gamble than in the past. However, if high inflation continues, the returns could be quite substantial.
It's a very, very good question.
That's an interesting sort of...
Over to you, Noah.
I mean, for me, I love real estate because people are always going to need somewhere to live. And the demand for homes and housing doesn't stop, you know, and for that reason, more and more properties will need to be built, you know, as the population increases, demand will always be high. And I believe that it is still sensible to buy off-plan development properties. However, you must do your correct due diligence. You know, you've got to know who the build team is behind that project. You've got to make sure you've done all the necessary checks because, of course, there is somewhat of a risk to it, but you've got to mitigate that risk by making sure you do the right due diligence. And this is where having the knowledge and having the information is important. Don't just go out on a whim, you know, and just invest, you know, based on, you know, the potential of brochures or, you know, pictures and CGIs of things you've seen. You know, get some proper information and knowledge behind that project before you do it.
Look, I've spent the last 30 or 40 years selling things off plan for various people, and I've seen some of the heartache that it can bring too. So I would suggest too, to add on to your good advice, is that people should almost do the due diligence on themselves.
Yeah.
Because when you're buying something 3 years forward, you've also got to know that you can fund it.
Correct.
And I'm afraid in these volatile times, and as this questioner identifies with, you know, very fluid economic situation in the country, to judge what your finances are going to be like in 3 years' time is quite a tough ask.
I think 3 years is a bit harsh. It's more like 18 months.
18 months, yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
Probably, maybe 2 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
and for me, in terms of the economy at the moment, I mean, where others may see problems, you know, I think there are solutions out there.
Opportunities.
There are opportunities.
I mean, I agree with the point on here that if we've got relatively high inflation and that spreads through to housing,
yes,
then, you know, if it was, well, 1 year, 2 years or 3 years, I mean, you could be talking 10, 20, 30% increase on your capital with actually laying out very little.
Could be,
yeah.
But then again.
Well, you've hit it, John, haven't you?
It
could be. And I just worry sometimes that the type of people that in this country, as opposed to, you know, Asia Pacific areas, things like that, people in this country who take a punt on buying off plan often actually don't have the wherewithal to complete, and they're relying on.
They're selling it on again, but staying on before it completes, and you must see a lot of that now. I mean, the other thing I would say is, and we're not seeing it at the moment. You know when a development is in a little bit of trouble, because the sign goes up, part exchange available.
Yes.
Now, when you see that, and you have bought off plan, and then you drive there, how are they getting on with it? Oh, hang on a minute. They're now offering part exchange on existing properties. Then you do know that things are going to getting tougher.
Yeah.
And that will happen, I think, over the next few years.
Yeah.
That shouldn't stop you, you know, buying off plan, I don't think. But I think that should make you a little bit more cautious, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. Yes, and so a bit of self-examination.
Yeah, absolutely.
John, just to finish off, are we finding developers being brave at the moment? Do they have a good view of the future market?
I'm certainly not being brave, and I'm considered a bold developer, apparently. Someone described me as that. The banker did, actually, quite very recently. So I'm being offered more part finished stock than I have done for quite a while, where developers have got into difficulty. But of course, a lot of that stock, they got into difficulties 2 years ago, and it takes 2 years ago for the receivers and everybody to get organised, to filter through. So that's a little bit perhaps a difficult one to judge whether going forward we're going to see that. And of course, some of the problems. I mean, there's one particular development that we're purchasing, and unfortunately, the developer died of COVID.
Oh, wow.
So halfway through. So these things are, terrible.
But I think this comes back to Noah's point, really. When you're looking at these things, do due diligence. You don't want really to be buying off a developer that relies on the skills and guidance of one particular man. It needs to be
the problem on the smaller developers. But we're all the same, Stephen, aren't we? we all run our own businesses. You know, Noah's self-employed, no doubt, runs his own business successfully. I do, you have in the past. It's very hard because apart from anything else, people want to talk to you. They don't, with all due respect, want to talk to quite often someone else who works with you. Yeah. They want to talk to you, and it is difficult.
Okay, well, there we are. That's all we've got time for today, gentlemen. So a big thank you to Noah Laguda and John Howard. Thank you so much for coming in, guys.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
Very good to see you. I look forward to seeing you next time on Property Question Time. See you then.